that time. This session is very much an additive one, building upon some of the conversations that have happened earlier today. No doubt we have heard the notion of partnership mentioned quite a bit. As well, we've heard the idea of the Institute serving as an engine, a hub, a forum, a laboratory to share ideas, to build ideas, to amplify ideas. Thinking about partnerships with respect to the Institute is a significant piece of what we're doing and planning for as well. Not only is it one of the pillars of the Institute, but it's also very much a lens through which we look at all of the programming, particularly around connected learning and learning in the world. When we speak of partnerships as well, certainly we're referring to those that are bi-directional. This is crucial, where we can gain insight from others and then also look to share where appropriate. We can scale and amplify. We think of partnerships in a sustainable fashion as well, ones that last more than a fleeting moment, of course, as well. And we think of partnerships as something both internal and on campus, and external and off campus. This is certainly an important part of the Institute, but fortunately we have a strong foundation from which we start. Partnerships, collaboration, working in a networked fashion has a long and storied tradition at Andover, and we see it in various ways, certainly within departments in the way in which faculty work, and we see it in more interdisciplinary ways, working across departments. We see it between and among our libraries, our archives, and our museums. Our outreach programs are absolutely emblematic of partnership. In our work with 8 Schools Association, and with some of our newer partnerships, with Khan Academy, certainly with our Learning in the World programs, and with our new partnership with the MacArthur Foundation as well. I'm very excited to explore this concept in a bit more detail and to hear from our panelists really how we can advance and enhance learning and teaching through networks, partnership, and collaboration with one another. And so without further ado, I'd like to open our conversation, and I would like to invite Caroline Odden to give us a sense of where we are with respect to partnerships and networks. Caroline, you serve as an instructor of astronomy and physics. You are also one of the inaugural Institute Fellows. Give us a sense of what role partnerships, what role networks play with respect to students doing robust science research.
Thanks, Eric. So I'm going to take a minute to describe briefly the project that I'm doing with the Institute, just to give you a sense, because it's a little bit different maybe than some of the other projects. So what we're doing is developing an astronomy portal, and we're going to ask astronomers to contribute pictures to this portal so that we can have our students do searches for variable stars within the images. And this might seem like a really strange idea. Why would a professional astronomer want to donate their pictures to Phillips Academy students to use? But in fact, it makes a lot of sense, because typically when people take an image in astronomy, they're focused on a single object in the image, and they pretty much ignore everything else that's in the picture. So when they're done with their research, these images just sit on hard drives and really never see the light of day again. So what we're going to be doing is asking astronomers to donate these images so that our students can use them in this process that we have to search for variable stars. And we think it will be, we really expect to have more images than we know what to do with. So it's a neat project, and how does collaboration come into this? Well, of course, this wouldn't work at all if we didn't already have a network of collaborators that are going to be willing to donate the images to us. So that's the first way in which it plays out. But beyond that, our students, when they do find something, will go back to the collaborators, and there will be some back and forth between the scientists that have donated the images and our students. So there's a lot of network in place already, but then that will be enhanced as the students go through this project. So in astronomy and in science in general, there are lots of ways in which collaborations are already in place. In fact, nowadays, it's quite unusual to see a science paper that doesn't have more than one author, and in fact, many of them represent several institutions. So the social life of science really involves collaboration. There's no way to avoid it. And with this project, and with really a lot of the other projects we have going on in astronomy research, students have a chance to basically have a window into this idea that the social life of science is collaborative. And so that is where we are with our project.
Wonderful. Thank you, Caroline. I love that idea of the social life of science, if you will, and wonder if we could take some of that energy and turn to another faculty member, Bill Scott, who serves as the department chair for mathematics, statistics, and computer science. And Bill, can you share with us a bit about what makes the Khan Academy partnership and the work that you're doing so special? What in particular brings that to life?
Yeah, I think I'd like to just start by talking about kind of how it happened. And John had the wonderful good sense to invite Sal to come to campus, and he's this person I certainly had read about in the New York Times. I saw a 60 Minutes piece on him. I thought this is a pretty incredible guy, and here he is, he's here, and I have an opportunity to say hello to him, and next thing I know, I have the good fortune of the school will fly me out to California to meet him. And so off I went with Chris Odden and Matt Lisa, and we arrived there thinking, I'm not sure if this is gonna work, and walked in the door. We arrived at Khan Academy at 9 o'clock in the morning. We walked in, and the average age in the room went up about 10 years. And there's Sal with all these young kids, and I just saw tons of energy there. And I went in, and I just marveled at what was going on there. And again, we opened the meeting, and we had gone on the Khan Academy website the night before to look at the calculus content. And to be honest, we didn't think it was very good. There wasn't much there, and we thought, what is this? And so we went in, and I opened the meeting by, there's a bit of a surprise. Sal was there. I actually wasn't thinking that he might be there. I thought we might just have a group of his younger guys who would talk to us, and there he is. And I looked across the table, and I said, with all due respect, Sal, we looked at the stuff online last night, and we weren't very impressed with it. And he looked across, he said, that's why you're here. And I said, and then the meeting just flipped in a hurry. Within an hour, we realized we were given the keys to get under the hood, and wow, the conversation flipped in a hurry. And what we came to understand was that he was going to trust us with creating all the calculus content that was going to be on Khan Academy, and suddenly we were very interested. Came back and needed to have the math, statistics, and computer science faculty on board. I knew that this would be a big endeavor, and that the only way it would work for us is if we had buy-in. And so first faculty meeting, first math department meeting last fall in September, Ben Eder came from Khan Academy and helped explain what it would mean for us to have a partnership with Khan Academy. Math department said, let's go. And so in 1 year, we delivered on a promise, and that is that we created about 3,000 problems for the Khan Academy website, and it's been just a wonderful experience. Now I'm teaching Math 570, I'm using the content in my classroom, and about 2 weeks ago, the kids in the class were a little unhappy. I gave them some Khan Academy problems on related rates. They found it to be really hard, difficult, and it was a set of problems that where it's a collaborative effort on this one set of related rate problems. There are a lot of different authors involved in it, including Sal Khan himself. The kids thought it was too hard, and so I said, well, let's write Sal Khan an email. And the kids said, we can do that? And I said, yeah, sure. And I said, well, dear Sal. And I said, what do you want to tell him? And so they came up with words that fiendish and this is diabolical. And so they came up with these wonderful SAT words to tell Sal Khan that this set of problems was just unfriendly. And so then I suggested in the last sentence that instead of having the kids asked to have 5 correct in a row, that they should only have 3 correct, because typically on Khan Academy, mastery is defined as getting 5 correct in a row. And so they wanted to move that number to 3 because they thought that would be fair. So I sent him the email, and they said, well, when is he going to get back to you? And I said, well, frankly, I don't know, but usually he gets back to me pretty quick. And so this was on a Thursday or Friday, and on Monday we hadn't heard back from him. On Tuesday we hadn't heard back from him. Finally we heard back from him, and it had been a while, and the kid said, well, I thought he got back to you quick. And then I just discovered that he had had his 3rd child that weekend. He had a son about 2 weeks ago. And so there's our relationship. We have a really good relationship with Sal Khan. I could go on for hours, but I will nip it there.
And maybe you could just help frame it for us. How many math problems created?
We've created about 3,000 problems. We've created about 300 a month over 10 months. Uploaded to the site somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,700. They're still working on it. I had emails from Sal yesterday that he was unhappy with a couple of problems that we had created, and so we keep working on that. About 20, there are probably 300 more that need to be uploaded. We've written, there's probably about 45 problems that still need to be written. And those are mine, and frankly, I've been delaying on them with some vector-valued functions because I want to put the icing on that cake.
Wonderful. And accessed by how many?
We've had, as of July, and that was only when about 1,500 problems had been uploaded, about half of it, we had 5.3 million problems attempted by 300,000 unique users, and pretty fascinating. I'll be here this afternoon. If somebody wants to talk about details about that, be happy to share that.
Outstanding. And we see here 2 wonderful examples of great teaching by Caroline and Bill. Gabbi, you benefited from this wonderful teaching and learning as a student here, a recent alumna, and now a student at Stanford. I wonder if you would take a few moments and reflect upon the significance of collaborative learning in a networked manner here at Andover and on the West Coast as well.
So at Andover, I was really privileged to take John Paul Free's hacking class, an interdisciplinary, both technical, computer, and legal approach to digital issues of the day, ranging from whistleblowing to issues of badware online. And I really enjoyed this class because I find that as our world becomes more interdisciplinary, as does its issues, for example, let's take NSA dragnet surveillance, we have to bring in topics like technology policy and computer science together in order to really ensure that students are prepared to handle a world where these topics aren't going to be really relegated to just one sphere. They're going to cross multiple academic contexts. And being in this class where I could learn about packet sniffing and also learn about the policies surrounding it was an incredible experience in preparation for taking on the issues that are facing on our world today. And the interdisciplinary love for learning I had in that class, the power to really appreciate the networks that can be formed between departments and the fruit that can be born from that, really affects me at Stanford today, and that this ethos of connected learning has really lasted with me. I am considering majoring in computer science or public policy, but I know that I want to merge the 2 as much as possible. And even in the student groups I formed partnerships with, I like both work in a group that encourages more girls to get into computer science, but also I'm a technology director for a Stanford and government group. And this ability to move between so many worlds is one of the best gifts that Andover has given me. And now, as I continue to really look into what I want to do with this interdisciplinary passion, I've learned that it's important to really grasp for opportunities that you felt like are previously inaccessible for you or something that you would never expect. One case was when I actually was really lucky to intern at the Berkman Center. I never thought I would be afforded such an opportunity as an Andover student, but getting that chance to cement what I wanted to do in academia, that is tech policy, was really powerful. And at Stanford, I unexpectedly became involved with the Hoover Institution, which is known on campus for being quite a conservative think tank. If you knew my political views, you'd know that they are quite different. But I had learned that they had a National Security Fellows mentorship program, which would put me in touch with people who had served in Afghanistan and served as colonels leading over 4,000 troops, to an NSA and CIA operative who had performed intelligence research in both Somalia and Afghanistan. And pursuing this unexpected lead, this unexpected partnership, really broadened my eyes to what technology policy can mean in the context of national security, which is what I'm thinking of pursuing with my degree now. And I thank Andover for putting that seed in me, making me think that academic departments don't need to be separate. They should be mixed. There's so many rich things to learn from just seeing what a mix of the humanities and tech can really lead to.
Thank you, Gabby. And again, we're starting to see some examples of just some outstanding pedagogy, outstanding learning in this sphere. Maybe we can shift to Connie. Connie Yowell serves as the Director of Education for the MacArthur Foundation. Connie, you have long been an advocate of learning in a connected space, as well as scaling ideas. I wonder if you could share some thoughts on the opportunities associated with educational technology and what this connected learning could mean.
I have a couple thoughts, but first I want to say, are you sure you're just a freshman? And I want to say two things to echo Ted a little bit by way of starting. One is to, as Ted said, to thank Andover for its brilliance in hiring John. The MacArthur Foundation does not regularly fund schools such as Andover. I will just say that. And it is with great pride and excitement that I am here and that we have provided support to Andover for this innovation lab and for this institute with John's leadership, just because I think it's an extraordinary opportunity with John's leadership. And I also... Thanks. I also want to thank Mr. Tang. Walking around this campus, it's not necessarily easy to feel a sense of urgency around educational reform. This is such an idyllic and wonderful setting. Education in the United States has not changed in more than 200 years. There are certain times, because of massive shifts, as John said, in globalization and in technology, that there are windows or opportunities for seismic shifts to happen. We're in that moment in education. We are absolutely in that moment for extraordinary change to happen, but only if we have incredible leaders who are well-resourced and have the opportunity to make those shifts happen. And for you to step up and support the Andover in the work that it's about to do is just extraordinary. And so I want to thank you for that, because I think the work that's about to happen here is incredibly important, not just for Andover, but for education writ large. So thank you for that. So I think what I'll comment on in response to Eric's question is to build on Bill's comments around Khan Academy. As a partner and as an example of a partner, and in terms of networking and the age that we're in terms of digital media. And John knows that I'm very blunt. So I'll just say that I was a little surprised that he chose Khan as a partner to start with, particularly for Andover. I would be one of many that might say, as a progressive educator, that Khan Academy would be probably not my first choice. But what I didn't realize was that you were hacking Khan Academy. and that you're being disruptive of disruption, which of course is what you do, and so brilliantly done. So I want to highlight that example in terms of how brilliant that work is and why it is so important. And in doing that, let me take one step back and say something about, from the perspective of the digital tools in the world we live in right now, what it means for pedagogy. Because so often when we talk about ed technology, the broader rhetoric is around big data, and it is around personalized learning, which big data is important. But I think we often overlook the other changes that digital media has wrought and are so important for pedagogical change. And what it is, they are the changes that have happened in music and in journalism and in other industries that we have to be paying attention to. Then there are three other shifts besides big data that are so important to be paying attention to for pedagogy. The first is the shift in participation. Digital media and our technology has completely decentered expertise and created the opportunity for peer-to-peer participation. What that has meant in the music industry, what that has meant in journalism, has completely shifted those industries. And for the faculty amongst us and for those that teach, shifting from the stand and deliver modes of teaching to really thinking about what peer-to-peer participation means in learning is a paradigmatic shift, and is something that we really have to start thinking about. The second big shift is the shift in production. And Jacques mentioned that earlier. The cost of the tools, tools for production, have gone from incredibly expensive to zero. And so all of our pedagogy for the last 100 years have been built around paper and pencil because those were our cheap tools. We now have really inexpensive tools for our students to learn through production, so that they can be multimedia, can be cross-disciplinary. Part of what's problematic about that is it then makes it really hard to understand. It's hard to make learning visible when it's multimedia. And our assessments have not caught up, and our ways of understanding what learning looks like in a multimedia world have not caught up because we still look for it in paper and pencil ways. So we have two huge shifts, participation and production for modes of learning. The third is networks. Right now, when we are participating and we are making and creating things, we can send them out through networks. So that it used to be, I would write a paper, I'd turn it into my teacher would grade it and give it back to me. We can now send out what we make and create to thousands of people and get feedback immediately, right? Because we are participating in networks. Another massive shift in the possibilities for what pedagogy can look like. And so as a caveat, what I want to say to you all as you're thinking about your creativity and innovation, and if the currency is time, I want to push you not just to think about how you organize the hours of your day, but those three things shift the very nature of time. They shift how you use your time and what your roles are within that time and how you're spending your time. So it's not just about the blocks and the hours. It's about how you're managing participation, production, and networks within the context of time that really matters. So then back to Khan Academy. Khan Academy is problematic as a learning tool because it is simply, in most respects, putting content up online for people to look at. That's like a 1.0 putting a textbook up online. But what you guys did participation, making and creating, and networks with feedback. You totally hacked Khan Academy and made it into what it should be.
I have more to tell you about.
I mean, that's brilliant. Like the best kind of partners and networks that you want are when kids are making and creating, putting it up and getting feedback. And so if we can shift to kids actually participating in the making of curriculum, the making of those challenges, putting them out there for other kids to work, not only work on them, but then give feedback on how to make them better. And then your kids are dying to find out, well, what did they think of what I made? Did they solve the problem I put out there? Was it too hard for them? Was it too easy for them? And so they're in constant communication, and you're managing that. My God, wouldn't Dewey just roll over in his grave and think that's the best thing since sliced bread? But that's, I mean, you totally, if Saul can then integrate that into his platform and have that process be what Khan Academy is for 2.0, then what Andover has done is advanced one of the largest platforms in ed tech for right now that actually I thought was holding back innovation, and you have actually advanced it in terms of innovation, which is a huge accomplishment, which nobody else has been able to do with him. So I thank you for that.
Thank you, Connie, and no doubt you have raised a number of ideas that would be fantastic for us to tackle in perhaps our next round of questions. I'd like to think about what you have offered and what we've heard as well in terms of some of the non-classroom learning that can take place, and would love to bring Ferd Alonso in. Ferd serves as the director of outreach programs here, as well as an instructor in math. Ferd, perhaps you can give us a sense of the role of partnerships in outreach programming here at Andover.
I think a couple of things. First, I want to start by saying that listening to Oscar this morning, I was getting chills because for me, the Tang Institute is really the culmination of 60 years of innovation and entrepreneurship at this school. We have, as he mentioned, so many programs that have started here at Andover, and having a place where those can be further nurtured, I think it's critical. For me, when I'm thinking about partnerships and a lot of the work that the outreach programs do, the word that keeps coming up is the multiplier effect. And I think that that's critical to all of these. So I like to tell stories, so I'll say a couple of stories. One would be, think of a student in inner city Chicago who has always dreamed of being a teacher, but the dream of getting a PhD was just nothing that felt within their reach. And suddenly they come onto our campus and join the IRT program. Fast forward 8 years, and that person is on a tenure track position at Columbia University. What impact has that happened? That sort of visit here to campus, that work that they did with the IRT, suddenly it's not just the impact that that had on their lives, but the impact it will have on the thousands of people whose lives that they are going to touch. And I think another example would be, think of a student, Tuba City, Arizona, on the Navajo Nation. They are going to high school, they weren't interested in going to college, but they're probably thinking about maybe the local community college, and they come here to this campus for 3 summers in MS squared, and suddenly the world is open to them. And not only, again, what's happening to them, that student ends up at Dartmouth, that student gets a master's in engineering, but the fact that I get a call after that kid's first year here from their counselor of Tuba City High School saying, what did you do to our kid? This was a student who never spoke up in class, who sort of seemed to be in the background, in the shadows, and suddenly this kid is the most visible kid on campus. They're talking about their experience out here. They're talking about the world beyond what they have experienced before. And that's, I think, a critical piece of the partnerships. The fact that not only are we impacting the students who are coming to here on campus and participating in all the outreach programs, but the fact that they're touching so many lives. And I think that that's sort of, that for me, it sort of encapsulates the fact that it's not a one-way street. It is a two-way street. And the fact that we are giving a lot to these students, and sometimes we don't even recognize the impact that we're having on them and on their communities. And I think that that's where the big change is. Because those students, their lives, they're changing their families' lives, they're changing the lives of the other kids at their school. Suddenly other students are saying, wait, I can do what? And we're not the only program out there. There's a lot of other programs out there. But the fact that they have a different worldview by participating in a lot of these outreach programs is amazing.
I'm imagining the concentric circles of change that happen as a result of what you're speaking about. I thank you as well and appreciate the fact that you brought up this notion of the bidirectional of learning on both sides, and I think that that's really critical. And wonder if we could take some of that thinking around off-campus and external outreach programming and shift to you, Raj. Raj, you serve as an instructor in biology and the director of the Neeswarth program which has been, by all accounts, highly impactful, has run for a decade, based in India. What role do partnerships, what role do networks play in this program?
So Niswarth is a 3-week, it's a summer service learning program bringing our students and faculty to various communities in India. And we interpret service learning to mean learning how to serve. And our emphasis is to learn about the needs of a community. And so how does one learn about the needs of another community, your own community? Whose voices do you listen to? Whose voices are often not heard? What kind of responses make sense then once you hear and understand the needs of a community? And so we think that an approach to community development work should be done with humility, mindfully, with empathy. We practice a lot of different skills, like Janine and Catherine said, listening, research, dialogue, writing, collaboration, often being uncomfortable in the process. And we also connect in the real world with some deep emotions and ideas like hope and resilience and truth and equity and love. And we do this as a habit for 3 weeks during the program, and we try to extend that also during the school year. So in our praxis approach, which is observe, reflect, act, reflect, act, we have partnered with many NGOs, like Teach for India, Akanksha, Manav Sadhana, corporations like the Parthenon Group, the ICICI Bank, government agencies in India, foundations, schools, individuals who are artists, bankers, architects, authors, professors. And we often do this actually through our connections, our network of Andover alums and parents and grandparents. And so we try to cast a wide net on who partners could be in our work around community development. So we connect the needs of a community, learning about the needs of a community, with people and organizations that are doing some amazing work. And what we witness as we have this partnership are varied approaches to development, different skill sets, access to resources that are fulfilling their missions or their personal values to do good work. And this type of access to innovative organizations, entrepreneurial, smart, creative people working on the front lines of communities around the issues of education, healthcare, nutrition, economic opportunity, is a type of education that we just simply can't get while we are on our campus. Successful partnerships in Niswarth have meant greater access and engagement with a wider range of ideas, approaches, ways of being in the world. Our students can imagine how they can start to align their interests and values with a meaningful professional life and a way of being in the world. So this helps to bridge this gap between who we are and who we want to become. And this is, an ongoing, I think, struggle for all of us. And to develop that as a habit when you're 15, 16, 17 years old, and to do it mindfully, and to do it with your peers, and to do it with faculty, and then to do it in a community here, is impactful to everybody who's involved. So maybe I'll just stop there.
I thank you for practicing what you preach and offering us some reflection. And I think a couple of other things which are really nice. One, the different actors with whom you've partnered and networked, and where that learning comes from as well, playing such a critical role in all of this, learning in community and with communities as well, no doubt contributes to the impact. And that's really a perfect segue to Kanyi. Kanyi Maqubela, we've given you a tall task. You serve as respondent to this panel. That means there are a lot of different ideas, thoughts, comments that have been offered so far, and I would love for you to process what resonates for you as an alumnus of this school, as a partner at the Collaborative Fund, as somebody who wears a few different hats thinking about education, the private sector, et cetera. What jumps out to you? What resonates here?
That is a very tall task, and I apologize in advance for undershooting it, but the things that I was very interested in, there were a couple of threads that were tying things together. One, it comes from one of my personal beliefs, which is that big data is very often just sloppy data. And when you're getting a deluge of information, which we do now, the ability to process it and react appropriately and react wisely is vastly overestimated. And often we don't actually use big data that we have such incredible access to as well as we should. And in that vein, I thought Connie's point about the sort of decentralization effect of the internet and of technology and of globalization it speaks to the challenges of that, because what's happening is who's a teacher and who's a student, who's doing the learning, who's doing the delivering of information is becoming wildly bidirectional. And so there's just incredible amounts of I have to adjust, I have to react to information while I'm also trying to deliver it on both sides. And so I think it's critical to adopt a mode of humility there. And in that vein too, with respect to this teacher-student thing flipped, I've often found that there's a scale is thought of as a gospel word, you know, and you got to go for scale, and scale is the reason that you're doing something well. But when I look at all of these examples, there's an incredible amount of intimacy in Bill's example of writing one email to Saul with 4 or 5 anecdotal comments and how that actually has the right type of ripple effect to truly manifest scale, and Caroline's example of, you know, students learning from each other in an astronomy project or in a science experiment that is sort of a closed circle. And so the conclusion that I would sort of tentatively draw right now is that it's okay to start small. It's good to start small. Intimacy with respect to education is critical, and big data isn't gospel. Big data can be really seductive without necessarily being productive.
I thank you for challenging us on some of this thinking, and this actually serves as a nice lead into our next round of questions, but particularly around the notion of scale that you brought up, and that there are various ways of conceiving of this and of ultimately having impact as well. You've all offered a sense of your vantage point with respect to partnerships, networks, and collaboration. Let's invite a little bit of imaginative thinking, version 2.0, version 3.0 of the networks that you're all associated with, and what you see as possibilities as well. And Caroline, let's start with you. 2 questions along these lines. One, what are you starting to see already from students as they start to live the social life of scientists? That's a make-up question from the first round I forgot to ask you. But it leads in well to thinking about what next? What could you see students doing, and what could you see in terms of shift with respect to pedagogy as a result of building out these networks even further?
Okay, so this is going to lead me to 2 separate thoughts. The first is that one of the things that I see from my students as they work with astronomers in the professional community is that they are really compelled to do their best work when they're working with people outside of the school. And I see that as a wonderful thing. They go through much of their schooling careers dealing with their teacher, passing things in, getting things back. And suddenly when they start working outside of the school with other professionals, they really want to bring out their A game. And so it's a wonderful thing for their own education. The other thing that happens is that my relationship with the students changes when there's an external entity involved. And we start working more as collaborators than as a teacher-student team. And I think that's also wonderful for the students. As they're heading toward adulthood, they will have mentors who are also collaborators as they go forward. And so to have some access to that kind of an experience is wonderful. And I think a lot of the other projects that people are describing have that same feel. I forgot what the second question was. Oh, what can I envision? So in my particular project, I think there's a lot of potential to perhaps invite other schools to join in the fun of looking for variable stars, which students find to be a very engaging and fun activity. I could imagine students being involved in the process of figuring out how to invite other students in. So that would be wonderful, and I also think there's a lot of potential. We already have astronomers that we collaborate with, but through this portal, I think we will develop new relationships. Those can go in different directions, and so there's a lot of potential to kind of see how things go. And I guess that would be my last thought. I think once you start moving in this direction of developing networks, things happen organically, and sometimes the best mode is just to seize on cool things that happen. So if someone approaches us and they have an idea and it sounds good, maybe we'll move in that direction, or maybe we'll have an idea and move in a different direction. And I think a lot of times these things just build in wonderful ways.
Wonderful, and you've alluded to a few things which, again, get us thinking about where all of this could go, particularly with reference to pedagogy and changing the role of the teacher in the classroom. Bill, would you mind picking up on that, again, with this thought of looking ahead to what partnerships or teaching in a networked fashion, like Khan Academy, et cetera, could mean for not only for students, but in terms of what happens in the classroom from the teacher's perspective?
Yeah, I think I'm going to address that. I'm going to take you back about 3 years ago. Pat Farrell was the head of the math department. We had a series of meetings about pedagogy. And Pat's idea, I'm sure, was to get different faculty members in the math department to share what they were doing in their classes, to help all of us realize that there's some neat things going on in the math department. In the tradition at this school and most schools, as a teacher goes into the classroom, they shut the door behind them, and God only knows what happens in there. And you know, that's something we clearly need to break down, given the way kids communicate today. And so my takeaway from a series of meetings is that there are three things that I thought I came away with. One is that as a department we see value in collaborative efforts, that we need to put kids together, working together and working with their teacher on tasks where you have 2 or 3 people who are throwing some ideas around. We needed to do that. We need to do that in our classroom. That was one. A second one is that the more we assess, the better our kids do. And assess means small assess, small a, not big A, not MCAS or SAT. But the more we assess, the better they do. And the third thing is that we need to ask hard questions and not be afraid to do that. These kids are very bright, and if we just stick with the textbook, that wasn't going to get it done. So, I reflected on that a lot, and I said, well, goodness, that all makes sense. I mean, that's not really complicated. But the part that was complicated for me was the assessment part. And how do we assess more often? How do we keep our kids on task? If I'm teaching a calculus class or whatever the class is. And so I started using two years ago. It wasn't long ago. I'm 61 years old. I've been teaching for 34 years. And 2 years ago, just 2 years ago, I started trying online resources. Got going on web work, and a bunch of things happened. One was the kids liked it. The kids liked doing homework on a computer. I said, well, that I guess isn't all that surprising. Second thing is that I would give the homework on a weekend, and on Sunday evening, and I'm thinking about what I'm going to do the next morning, I could see who had done the homework, how they were doing on the homework. I walked into class Monday morning knowing that the homework was done. What a novel idea. I could see which problems they struggled on. I didn't have to bother going over stuff they already knew how to do. They enjoyed doing it. And so I said, this is interesting. And then the Khan Academy thing happened. And it's so interesting what you said to me, and that is Sal Khan doesn't have it right yet. And I totally agree with that. Khan Academy is a solitary activity. Most kids who are doing it are sitting in their room and they're playing the How Smart Am I? They don't want to watch his videos, even though he's got a $1 million voice. They're not all that interested in watching his video. They're interested in doing math problems. And so there needs to be really good content there. Now, how do you square away this, okay, the kids like being on a computer, but we want to do collaborative work, and Khan Academy is this isolation thing. And so now I'm starting to play with that idea. And that's, a month ago in my Math 570 class, my students will be coming. I've invited all of them to come in the hallway afterwards, and you can ask them how it's going. But I had an idea, why don't I put them together at a computer, doing Khan Academy problems in teams. And so I put them in teams of 3, and they all had computers at their desks, and each one was to achieve mastery by getting 5 correct in a row. Of course, the first one who would get 5 correct in a row would immediately want to go to Facebook, right? And so I said, well, this isn't working. They're not collaborating. How do I fix this? And I said, I came up with this idea of, well, I'm going to have a little gateway activity, a quiz or something. I called it a group activity. And at the end, they could start the group activity after all 3 of them had finished. And I wouldn't hand them the piece of paper to write on. And so now there's a motivation. Okay, there's incentive. Okay, Susie is finished first, and Joey next door is struggling, and Susie's not going to go and do Facebook now. Susie's got to hop in and help Joey. Suddenly I found a way to, in this case, get them talking. And that was really fascinating to me. And so I'm just scratching the surface on this. I'm learning a lot as I go, but I'm having a blast at it. On the 2.0, where we're going, I'm really interested in this collaborative exercise and how we do that. And I'm also, at lunch today, Lisa in the math department came up to me and said, I think we got to get going on Khan Academy with statistics. And they're talking about a little curriculum change here. The Khan Academy is really eager for us to build out the multivariable calculus and the linear algebra piece. That would be the post-BC calculus piece. They're really eager for us to get going on that, and I'm taking a deep breath because it was a lot of work this last year to make this happen, and that's enough for now.
No doubt all of this will be a lot of work, but there's a lot of excitement as you have painted the picture for us.
The one thing I didn't say,
yes.
The kids love feedback.
Yeah. Go figure.
They love feedback, and Khan Academy gives them instant feedback. WebWork gives them instant feedback, much faster than I can do. They know when they're troubled. I don't need to tell them. It doesn't take a test to tell them they're in trouble. And on Khan Academy, and on WebWork, I can watch them remotely. While I'm watching a soccer match on TV Sunday morning, I can look at my computer and see who's doing what.
Well, let's put it to the test. Gabby, do you agree or disagree? Students like feedback. Don't feel compelled to agree with Mr. Scott.
I do agree that students do love feedback. Like, I've used Khan Academy, and I love getting instant feedback on how I'm doing and what I should improve. But some form of scaling to students that I find really fascinating are these online forums used in classes. Like, we go on Moodle or like write posts on that. I have to say, from my highly unscientific ethnographic analysis, students hate that. Like, the idea of having to respond to a prompt after every class becomes an issue of I have class in 5 minutes, I haven't written my response, I'm gonna button mash until I get 100 words out. And I believe that scaling out the students has to require some feedback involved, instead of using some faceless online form to try and half-heartedly continue class discussions. One instance where it did work was when I actually used Facebook as a class communication tool outside of the classroom. That gives you a sense of a closer form of interaction going online as opposed to just a very plain text form. You feel like it's going to be more interactive because you get notifications about who is talking on this forum, who's discussing this class on your phone as you're walking to some other place. And that ability to be so wired into your class and not have to go out of your way to access a different platform for that discussion is so useful. And when it comes to students scaling their own initiatives, I feel like it's empowering to let students try and scale their own projects for the community, as difficult as it may be. When I was at Andover, I led a math counts program with middle schoolers in Lawrence, and I really was psyched about getting these kids into math counts competitions. But unfortunately, no matter how well me and my volunteers had taught, which wasn't that well at all. We were not real teachers. We were students learning calculus ourselves. What qualified us to be math counts tutors? Every time we went to a competition, it was hard to see the students suddenly lose confidence compared to a team that had matching sweaters and two really older looking teachers at the helm, as opposed to a bunch of high school students who weren't too sure of what they were doing themselves. And I feel like leading students into scaling their own initiatives for the community is a challenge. It has worked in the past. At Stanford, my Women in CS group, She++, had the Pound Include Fellowship. You could tell this group also doubles as a C++ pun generator. But after this fellowship, when we brought 30 people from around the US, from all walks of life to Stanford to get to enter some coding sessions, to meet with leaders in the field, I actually saw 2 of these girls in the Washington Post all of 4 or 5 months later. They had coded an app after the tragedy and fallout in Ferguson, Missouri, to basically serve as a Yelp for policemen in their local towns. And that was incredible. To see that that Pound Include fellowship actually had an impact on students really revitalized my hope as to what students could do for other students, or what capabilities students had for scaling up their initiatives to others. I don't really know what that secret sauce is yet to making those student-led initiatives work when they're scaled out, but that's a question that really weighs on me and that I would love to see the Tang Institute explore. How can students scale their own impact and try to improve the community in their own ways?
Wonderful. Thank you, Gabbi. And Connie, maybe we can have you chime in based upon this and what you've heard, but also giving some thought to where you see learning in a networked fashion going. And also, is there any global dimension to this as well that we ought to be thinking about?
I'm just going to follow you around. I don't know. You're incredible. Yeah, clearly. Gosh, I just want to say I'm really excited about being here. I just think that Andover has such an incredible set of resources and faculty, and there are so many incredible challenges and opportunities going forward for thinking about what learning can look like in the 21st century. And I just feel like this, you all are such an incredible group, and this is such an extraordinary opportunity to work together to come up with what the future can look like. It's just very exciting to be here. So I just want to say that again. I guess a couple of quick thoughts. One is, as on the networked side, we use a phrase called interest-driven learning, which is to say that we, when we have funded ethnographies of young people pursuing their interests online and learning, what that looks like online is very different from when young people are online being social. So when they're on Facebook and doing other things. And so interest-driven platforms also look very different than what the EdTech community has designed for education. Because all of those are mediated by authoritative figures. and that ends up creating very different kinds of relationships than the relationships we all engage in when we're just trying to get better at something that we're passionate about. And so the interest-driven networked communities online that are designed for pursuing your interests and pursuing them in ways so that you can get better at them are all designed to be able to ask your community questions, to figure out, to have lots of resources that you can pull from just in time as you're trying to solve problems. And what's really critical about them is that they are all intergenerational. Our school systems still tend to be very age segregated. And when you're age segregated, it's really hard to find expertise, right? And that expertise then only comes from adults in authority. And authority sort of can sometimes undermine the adult-youth relationship when you're really just after knowledge and trying to figure out how to get better at something. And so I think part of the challenge going forward in learning when we think about peer-to-peer participation is not just about a person interacting with someone of their own age. It is interacting with people who have a shared interest and a shared purpose and are trying to get better at something. And so that then creates a different kind of context, and then expertise is not necessarily vested in age. It's vested in what you know about something. And then the online forums are then organized around mentorship, they're organized around feedback, and they're organized in all of the just-in-time learning ways that we know are particularly effective. Astronomy has a ton of them that are just outstanding, and I'm sure you're very familiar with them, and they're great. And so that's sort of my hope for how we think about both the design of face-to-face interaction and the design of networks. So I'm actually less interested in a flipped classroom in the way that we are talking about it right now, and much more interested in how do we organize face-to-face interaction and networked online interaction in ways that enable interest-driven communities and pursuits. And I think that's the real sort of 2.0 promise that I'm quite excited about. Really quickly, what I'll say about the global context is that I think as soon as we move into the online possibilities of networking, it immediately opens up the question of learning's global. It just is. It's both local and it's global. And then, so how do we bring in, because networks are global, how do we bring in the global context into that conversation?
A wonderful question to end on. Thank you for your thoughts. And Raj, would you like to pick that up, particularly around the global learning piece and in version 2.0 or 3.0, how we bring that home as well?
Yeah, so I've been just thinking about interest-driven, and I think connecting that to the needs of others and the needs of the community, and to have that balance, I think keeps us mindful, present, builds our levels of empathy, compassion. And I think we need a commitment. So as a part of 2.0, thinking about global work, I think we need a commitment to feeling that our students need these types of skills and mindsets. And we have an opportunity to design these types of experiences and learning for them. My own opinion is I think at a school like this that has over $100 million annual budget, we have an obligation to do that with our groups of students here. And students are interested. And again, at their age, they are asking, how am I connecting my interests and talents to what's needed in my community, in other communities? So I think one is commitment. The next is a connection between what's happening on our program and the community at Andover. And so meshing these off-campus experiences into the classroom, into the community, opening up for people who can't travel, and opening up to other partners. I think, for example, this summer, in terms of connecting also to other partners. We invited Exeter to join the NISWARTH program, and 4 students and a faculty member joined us. And I think this, it was a wonderful partnership. I hope it grows in a lot of different ways. But the notion of competition and rivalry between these 2 schools, and I'm a varsity football coach, so this is also part of how we approach Andover, Exeter, and shifting that to collaborating and sharing resources and the possibility to do so to make programs even richer. I think we've got to be open to that all the time. So commitment, connection, and the last is this is not easy work. And to have a level of resilience, to have a level of support personally with other faculty members, with the institution as a whole, to feel like this type of work requires ongoing professional development, ongoing curriculum innovation, ongoing student programming, research. And that's why I'm just so excited about the Tang Institute, to be able to support that in a structural way, institutionally, all the time for all of us.
And we certainly share that excitement as well. That idea of opening up. Ferd, I wonder if you could take that on in thinking about the future of outreach programs, and particularly with respect to networks and what role that they play in that. We've got here. We have one right here.
Testing. There we go. I got it. So I spent a lot of my time thinking about 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, 5.A, C, B. And so I'm going to just throw out a couple of pieces. The first one relates to this bidirectionality. I think a lot of times when we are engaged in partnerships, there's sometimes this sense of going to save others and going to a place and we are delivering and they're the recipients of and we are delivering. And I would love and envision a way in which students, for example, in MS Squared or in PALS, are not being tutored by Phillips Academy students. They're working with Phillips Academy students on learning the same material. So we've sort of started a little bit this with a pilot that we're running with an online BC calculus course, and really thinking about we're pairing students that are covering the same material, and they're going to be helping and supporting each other. And how do they communicate with one another so that we can move beyond that sense of we are helping others learn when instead of we're helping each other learn. I think the second one relates to this multiplier effect, and in what ways can we help and work with teachers to continue the work that's happening here on campus during the summers. There was something called the Andover Dartmouth Institute, in which we worked with public school teachers from all over the country in working on different, how do we teach mathematics? How do they do it? How do we do it? How can we learn from each other? Breadloaf does a lot of that work right now, not just with students, but with teachers. And if you get a chance to go into Lawrence, into one of the poetry reading nights, and see 200 kids and families writing their own poetry and reading their own poetry and engaging with each other, and the high school is simply asking, how did you get this to happen? You know, we sometimes don't find the opportunity for teachers to come to the school, but somehow we've been able to work with teachers and families to sort of build those connections. And I think that there's a back and forth there that a lot of times doesn't happen in partnerships. And we somehow have to find a way that communication, that we're hearing what the families, and I think in some ways it connects a lot with what you were talking about in terms of NISWARTH, and sort of not going in as like, here's the project that we've decided we're going to do to help you, but instead listening to what the needs are, and opening ourselves up to the possibility that we're probably going to get learn as much, if not more, than what we're giving.
And no doubt there are a number of connection points, as you've just pointed out, for across all of the work that you're thinking about and doing on a daily basis. We literally have just 2 minutes left, but Kanyi, just quickly, no doubt you're constantly peering past the horizon. Give us, again, some sense of what resonates here in that 2.0, 3.0 thinking in a
the things that are resonating really richly for me are the notion of student agency. I think that's an exciting one. The notion of the line between work and play being blurred and there being intentionality around designing tools so as to ensure that. And I also think that creating a space for flexibility so that while Bill is opening the door and collaborating with everybody, he can also close the door and learn with his students and see how it is, and being in a mode of knowing that a teacher is going to go through their own process, and sometimes they want to be fully open, sometimes they don't necessarily have to be, and so all of those things in my mind speak to a great degree of humility about the status quo being wrong versus right, and being willing to experiment, and being especially willing to listen to participants who had not yet had a voice. And the students strike me as the one who currently are the loudest one of those.
Those are wonderful words. I believe that we should close on the truest test of this being a fun conversation is that time has flown. And unfortunately, we're going to have to bring it to a close right now. However, I invite you to continue the conversation at 5:30 when we have our reception. And no doubt you'll have a chance to interact with our panelists. I would like to just very quickly say thank you for raising ideas and thoughts and also questions as well, which are tremendously valuable. You've given us some sense of where we are, where we could be going, and unearthed some of the how to get there, and no doubt the challenges involved as well. But mostly you've inspired us. So I thank you, and I would ask our audience to join me in thanking our all-star panel for their insight into collaboration.